The rain hadn't started yet, but Delaney Grace Rhodes could feel it coming. She always could. A gift passed down from her grandmother, along with the recipe book currently propped open on her kitchen counter, its pages worn thin from 3 generations of loving hands. Just this once, she whispered to herself, carefully applying mascara in her bathroom mirror. The words felt foreign, like borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. When was the last time she'd done something just for herself? Between managing Sweet Grace's bakery and caring for her mother, whose good days were becoming increasingly rare, Delaney had forgotten what it felt like to put on a dress that wasn't dusted with flour. The rental dress, a soft sage green that made her gray eyes look almost silver, hung on her bedroom door. It was prettier than anything she owned, with its delicate lace overlay and subtle shimmer. Maddie had insisted on it, had practically strong-armed her into the boutique yesterday after closing the bakery. "Girl, you cannot go on a blind date wearing one of your flower child dresses," Maddie had declared, her perfectly manicured hands already flicking through racks. "Trust your bestie on this one." Now, standing in her small bathroom with its perpetually dripping faucet, Delaney wondered if she should trust anyone at all. The last time she'd let someone set her up. No, she wouldn't think about that tonight. Her phone buzzed against the counter, making her jump and smudge her mascara. "Maddie, do not chicken out. I swear on my entire TikTok following, this guy is perfect for you. He's a professor at the community college, sophisticated, stable, everything you need." Delaney's fingers hovered over the keys. She could cancel, make up an emergency at the bakery. Her mother could be having a bad day. It wouldn't even be a lie, really. Every day was a bad day lately, just in different ways. But then she caught her reflection in the mirror, a woman with tired eyes and hope she couldn't quite kill no matter how hard life tried. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes, sugar, the bravest thing you can do is show up." So she did. The restaurant, Mason's, was nicer than her usual haunts. Crystal glasses caught the warm lighting, creating little prisms on pressed white tablecloths. Delaney clutched her small purse, feeling every bit the imposter in her rented dress. "Reservation for Lawrence?" she asked the hostess, proud that her soft southern accent didn't waver. "Yes, ma'am, right this way." The table was perfect, tucked away in a corner with a view of both the bar and the garden terrace. Delaney sat, smoothing the dress over her knees. 7 p.m., right on time. She didn't notice the man watching from the shadowed booth across the room. Didn't see how his blue-gray eyes tracked her movements, or how his scarred hands tightened around his water glass when she smiled at the waiter. 7:15 p.m. She ordered a glass of wine. 7:30 p.m. The wine arrived. She took small sips, checking her phone. No messages. 7:45 p.m. The waiter stopped by again, sympathy poorly hidden behind his professional smile. "Would you like to order, ma'am?" "Just a few more minutes, please." 8 p.m. The wine was gone. So was her appetite. So was whatever scraps of dignity she'd walked in with. She stood carefully, leaving enough cash to cover the wine and a generous tip, because someone should be kind tonight, even if it had to be her. The first drops of rain hit the windows as she gathered her purse. That's when she heard it. A deep voice, quiet but clear. "You shouldn't have to walk home in the rain." She turned and everything changed. Not because of his height, though he was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Not because of his looks, though the way his dark shirt stretched across broad shoulders spoke of military precision. No, everything changed because when Beckham James Voss looked at her, she felt seen. Not just the dress or the makeup or the careful smile she'd practiced in the mirror. He saw the flour under her fingernails that never quite washed away, the worry lines around her eyes, the way her hands shook, just slightly, from exhaustion and something deeper. He saw her, and in his eyes, she saw something too. Recognition. The kind that only comes when one broken person meets another and thinks, "Oh, there you are." The rain fell harder outside, drumming against the windows like nature's own heartbeat. Neither of them moved. Neither of them had to. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay exactly where you are, letting the moment stretch like pulled sugar, sweet and fragile and full of possibility. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is breathe and wait for what comes next. Beckham. James Voss hadn't planned on speaking to her. He'd been content in his corner booth nursing a glass of water. Never alcohol, not since Afghanistan, and working through the endless paperwork that came with veteran support groups. But something about the way she held herself, straight-backed and dignified even as hope drained from her eyes, struck a chord he thought he'd buried years ago. He reached for his umbrella. Plain black, military grade, because some habits never die, and found himself standing before he'd made the conscious decision to move. You shouldn't have to walk home in the rain. The words surprised him as much as they did her. He hadn't spoken to a stranger voluntarily in months? Years? Time had a way of blurring when you spent most of it trying to forget. But Delaney Grace Rhodes didn't look at him with pity or fear, the way most people did when they noticed his scars or the way his left hand sometimes trembled. Instead, she looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I drove, actually," she said, her voice carrying that gentle southern lilt that reminded him of home, before the war, before the nightmares. "But thank you, Mr. Beckham, just Beckham." He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how much space he took up. "I saw—" He stopped, realizing how it might sound. "I mean, I couldn't help but notice that I got stood up." A small, self-deprecating smile touched her lips. "Don't worry. It's not the first time, probably won't be the last." The resignation in her voice made something in his chest tighten. Before he could stop himself, he said, "Their loss." She blinked, surprised. A faint blush colored her cheeks, visible even in the dim restaurant lighting. "That's kind of you to say." "Not kind, just true." The words came easier now, like rusty, gears finally finding their rhythm. Would you like to get coffee?" The question hung between them, fragile as spun sugar. Beckham immediately wanted to take it back. He hadn't been on a date since before his last tour. Didn't even know if he remembered how to have a normal conversation anymore. But Delaney was already shaking her head, though not unkindly. "I can't. My mother. She needs me. I have to get back." Something in her tone made him think there was more to it than a simple family obligation. He recognized the weight of responsibility in her voice. He carried enough of his own. "Another time, maybe," he offered, surprising himself again. He pulled a business card from his wallet. Simple, white, with just his name and number. The cards were meant for veterans seeking support, but somehow this felt more important. She took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. "You're sure? About coffee?" "Yes." He managed a small smile, the kind he'd almost forgotten how to give. "I own the place across from Sweet Grace's bakery." Her eyes widened. "The Morning March? That's yours?" He nodded. The coffee shop had been his salvation after returning home, a quiet space where he could control every variable. "Been watching your lemon squares in the window for months." "Never. Worked up the courage to come in." "But you worked up the courage tonight?" "Sometimes the right moment finds you." He glanced at the rain-streaked windows. "Even if it's not the moment you expected." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain and the distant clink of glasses from the bar. For the first time in years, Beckham felt something like peace. "I should go," Delaney said finally, though she made no move to leave. "My mother, she gets confused at night. Sundowners, the doctors call it." Understanding dawned. "Alzheimer's?" She nodded, and he saw the same bone-deep exhaustion he felt mirrored in her eyes. "Early onset. Some days are better than others." "I know something about that." He did, not Alzheimer's, but the way trauma could steal someone's mind piece by piece. "Let me walk you to your car at least. Share my umbrella." This time, she didn't refuse. They walked together through the restaurant, past tables of happy couples who had no idea they were witnessing something rare and fragile being born. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist, but Beckham opened his umbrella anyway. Delaney's car, a well-loved Honda Civic with a small dent in the passenger door, sat under a streetlight. She turned to him, keys jingling softly in her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for making a horrible evening less horrible. Thank you for letting me." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Your coffee shop opens at 6, right?" 5:30, actually. His heart did something complicated in his chest. "Baker's hours." "Baker's hours," she agreed, and he could have sworn her accent got just a touch stronger, sweeter. "Well, Beckham, just Beckham, maybe I'll see you around." He watched her drive away, standing in the rain long after her taillights had disappeared. His umbrella hung forgotten at his side. Back in his truck, he sat for a long moment, listening to the rain and thinking about the way she'd said his name. His phone lit up with a message from his VA counselor about tomorrow's group session, reminding him why he shouldn't get involved with anyone. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was flour under fingernails and gray eyes that understood too much. Sometimes the things we shouldn't want are exactly what we need. Sometimes the brokenness in others helps us recognize the pieces of ourselves we thought were lost forever. And sometimes, on a rainy night in South Carolina, two people who have forgotten how to hope remember just for a moment what it feels like to begin again. His hands didn't shake once as he drove home. "You're humming." Maddie Bishop leaned against the bakery counter, her copper-highlighted hair catching the early morning sun. Her phone was already up, recording for her TikTok. "You never hum." Delaney continued piping delicate rosettes onto a batch of cupcakes, pretending she didn't notice her best friend's knowing smirk. "I always hum." "No, honey, you stress bake in silence while having entire conversations with your piping bag." Maddie zoomed in dramatically on the cupcakes. "These babies know all your secrets, don't they? If you're going to interrogate me, at least help with the display case." Delaney nodded toward the fresh batch of lemon squares cooling on the rack. The same lemon squares he had mentioned watching through his window. "Fine, but only because my followers love your aesthetic." Maddie grabbed the display tray, her bangles, jingling, "Now spill." "What happened last night? Professor Lawrence was a no-show, wasn't he? I already ripped him a new one on Rate My Professor." Delaney's hand stilled over the cupcake. "Maddie!" "You didn't." "Oh, I did, but that's not why you're humming." Maddie's honey-colored eyes narrowed. "Something else happened. Something with that tall drink of water I saw you talking to." The rosette Delaney was piping wobbled slightly. "You were there? Girl, please. You think I'd set you up on a blind date and not make sure you were okay?" Maddie's expression softened. "After what happened with—" "Don't." Delaney set down the piping bag. "Please." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle whir of the industrial mixers and the early morning bustle outside. Sweet Grace's was still quiet, that peaceful hour before the morning rush when everything smelled of possibility and fresh bread. "His name is Beckham," Delaney finally said, unable to keep the words in any longer. They spilled out like overfilled coffee cups. "He owns Morning March." Shut up!" Maddie nearly dropped the tray of lemon squares. "The hot veteran with the perfect beard? The one who makes that cold brew that should be illegal in 3 states? That Beckham? You know him?" "Know of him. He's got quite the following among my coffee-obsessed viewers. Very mysterious, very broody, very, I could kill you with this espresso machine, but instead I'll make you the best latte of your life." Maddie's eyes sparkled. "And he talked to you?" "He never talks to anyone except his regulars." Delaney felt her cheeks warm. "He offered me his umbrella." "Honey, that man hasn't offered anyone anything in the 2 years since he opened that shop." Maddie finished arranging the lemon squares, each one perfectly aligned. "Did you get his number?" "He gave me his card." Delaney touched her apron pocket, where the simple white card sat like a promise. And nothing. I have to get these orders done before." The bell above the door chimed, cutting her off. Beckham stood in the doorway, early morning light haloing his broad shoulders. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal Henley pushed up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and scattered with scars. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered after a workout. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying that same quiet strength from last night. Maddie made a small choking sound that somehow transformed into a professional cough. "Well, would you look at the time? I have a thing, a very important thing. With people. Important people." She grabbed her phone, already backing toward the kitchen. "Don't forget to post those cupcakes to the gram, D." And then she was gone, leaving Delaney alone with Beckham and 24 half-frosted cupcakes between them. "Your friend is subtle," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "About as subtle as a marching band." Delaney wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly aware of the flour in her hair and the smudge of vanilla extract on her wrist. "I wasn't expecting—" "Me?" He stepped closer to the counter, eyes tracking over the display case. "I brought coffee. Fair trade since you've been feeding my customers those lemon squares for months." That's when she noticed the 2 cups in his hands. Steam curled from one, the other topped with a perfect swirl of whipped cream. "How did you know I like caramel white mocha, extra whip, cinnamon dust?" He set the cup down carefully. "You order it every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. like clockwork." She stared at him. "You notice that?" "I notice a lot of things." His eyes met hers, steady and sure. "Like how you always give the extra muffins to the kids waiting for the school bus, or how you talk to the flowers in your window boxes when you think no one's watching." Heat crept up her neck. "I didn't think anyone could see that from across the street. I wasn't trying to—" He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "I'm making this weird, aren't I?" "No," she said quickly. "Well, maybe a little, but nice weird. Good weird." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "I can work with good weird." She took a sip of the mocha. It was perfect. Sweet, but not cloying, with just enough bite from the espresso. "This is amazing. High praise from a baker. Speaking of which," she reached for one of the fresh lemon squares, wrapping it carefully in parchment paper. "Fair trade, right?" Their fingers brushed as she handed it over. This time neither of them pulled away too quickly. "I should get back," he said finally. "Morning rush?" "Right. Of course." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for the coffee." He was almost to the door when he turned back. "Delaney?" "Yes?" "Would you like to have dinner with me? A real dinner, not just coffee and lemon squares." Her heart stuttered. My mother—" "I know a place, close to home, quiet. We could do early before sunset." His eyes held understanding. "Sometimes the best dates work around real life." Dates. The word hung in the air between them, full of possibility and terror and hope. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." The bell chimed again as he left, and Delaney stood there holding her perfect mocha, watching him cross the street to his shop. Through the window she saw him take a bite of the lemon square. He closed his eyes, smiled. From the kitchen, Maddie's voice carried, "Girl, if you don't spill every detail right now, I'm going live about this to all my followers." Delaney laughed, the sound as bright and warm as the morning sun streaming through her windows. For the first time in years, she felt like she was waking up to something more than just another day of survival. She picked up her piping bag, ready to finish the cupcakes. But this time, when she talked to them, she didn't mind if anyone was watching. Sometimes the sweetest moments come wrapped in ordinary packages. Coffee cups, lemon squares, and the promise of something more. Sometimes, love speaks in the language of simple things. And sometimes, on a quiet morning in a small southern town, two people who have forgotten how to trust remember what it feels like to take a chance. The rosettes she piped were perfect after that. Delaney's mother was having a good day. Those were becoming rare enough to feel like gifts, precious and fragile as spun sugar. "You look pretty, baby," Margaret Rhodes said, watching Delaney apply mascara in the hallway mirror. Her mother sat in her favorite armchair, the one that still smelled faintly of her gardenia perfume from better days. "Are you going somewhere special?" "Just dinner, Mama." Delaney's hands trembled slightly as she closed the mascara tube. She'd chosen a simple dress, cornflower blue cotton with tiny white flowers. Nothing fancy, but she'd let her hair down for once, the blonde waves falling past her shoulders. "With a boy?" Her mother's eyes sparkled with familiar mischief. "Must be special if you're wearing Grandma Grace's earrings." Delaney touched the small pearl drops self-consciously. "His name is Beckham." "Beckham?" Her mother tested the name. "Strong name. Military?" "Yes, ma'am. How did you—" "The way you said his name. Like it carries weight." Margaret smoothed her lap blanket, the one covered in faded yellow roses. "Your daddy's name felt like that too before." The silence that followed was heavy with memories of a man who'd never come home from Desert Storm. Delaney swallowed hard. "Mrs. Patterson from next door is coming to sit with you. She brought her famous chicken casserole and those mystery novels you like." "I know, sugar. You've told me 3 times." Her mother's smile was gentle. "I'm having a clear day. Go, be young, be happy." The doorbell rang before Delaney could respond, but instead of Mrs. Patterson's familiar floral perfume, the scent of rain and coffee drifted in. Beckham stood on her porch, looking both powerful and uncertain in dark jeans and a navy button-down. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, not store-bought but hand-picked, their stems still bearing traces of earth. "I hope I'm not too early," he said, then noticed Margaret watching from her chair. Something shifted in his stance, military precision softening into southern courtesy. "Ma'am?" "Well now." Margaret's voice carried that steel magnolia warmth that Delaney remembered from church socials and summer barbecues. "Come in here where I can see you properly." Beckham's eyes met Delaney's, asking silent permission. She nodded, heart thundering against her ribs. He moved with careful grace despite his size and offered Margaret the wildflowers. "These reminded me of the ones that grow behind Sweet Grace's. Black-eyed Susans." Margaret touched a yellow petal. "My mother's favorite. She used to say they were stubborn flowers, bloom where they're planted no matter how hard the ground." "Smart woman," Beckham said quietly. "She was." Margaret's eyes clouded briefly, then cleared. "You'll take care of my girl?" "Mama," Delaney protested softly. "Yes, ma'am." Beckham's voice carried the weight of a soldier's oath. "Though from what I've seen, she takes pretty good care of herself." Margaret nodded, satisfied. "Good answer." The door chimed again, Mrs. Patterson this time, arms full of casserole dish and large print novels. Delaney used the moment to grab her purse, kiss her mother's cheek, and whisper final instructions to their neighbor. Outside, the evening air hung heavy with approaching rain. Beckham's truck sat in her driveway, freshly washed but bearing the scratches and dents of actual use. He opened the passenger door for her, then paused. "Your mother? She seems wonderful." "She is." Delaney settled into the seat, breathing in leather and the faint scent of his cologne. "Today's a good day. She remembers who I am, where she is. Tomorrow." She trailed off. "Tomorrow's not here yet." He closed her door gently, then walked around to the driver's side. The engine rumbled to life, classic rock playing softly on the radio. They drove in comfortable silence, passing familiar landmarks. The high school where Delaney had once dreamed of becoming a professional baker, the park where local bands played on summer evenings, the Veterans Memorial, where she sometimes saw Beckham standing alone in the early morning hours. He pulled into a gravel driveway that wound through pine trees. A small restaurant emerged, more of a converted farmhouse really, with white clapboard siding and twinkling lights strung along the wraparound porch. "Lucy's," Delaney breathed. "I haven't been here since your grandmother's last birthday." At her surprised look, he added, Small town. People talk, especially about Sweet Grace's coconut cake. The first drops of rain began to fall as they rushed to the porch. Inside, mismatched tables draped in checkered cloths filled the converted rooms. The walls held local art and faded photographs of soldiers, different wars, same young faces. Their table sat in what used to be a morning room, windows on three, sides showing the approaching storm. A candle flickered between them, casting warm shadows. "How did you get a reservation?" Delaney asked. "Lucy's is always booked weeks in advance." The owner's son was in my unit. Beckham's fingers drummed once on the table, then stilled. "We went through some tough times together." She heard what he didn't say in the careful neutrality of his voice. Reached across the table to touch his hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, steady against hers. The waiter appeared. Tommy, Lucy's grandson, barely 18 and rail-thin in his white apron. "Evening, Captain, Ms. Rhodes." He grinned. "Grandma's making her famous fried chicken. Says it's not negotiable." Beckham's tension eased slightly. "Never argue with Lucy about food." "Or anything else," Tommy agreed cheerfully, then disappeared toward the kitchen. Thunder rolled outside. But in here, surrounded by the smell of homemade biscuits and the soft glow of candlelight, it felt more cozy than threatening. "Captain?" Delaney asked softly. "Former." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "Another lifetime." "Does it feel that way? Like another life?" He was quiet for a long moment, rain pattering against the windows. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Depends on the day, the sounds, the weather. The storms? Yeah." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and brave at once. "The storms are hard, but..." He glanced at their joined hands. "Some things help." Before she could respond, Tommy returned with plates of golden brown chicken, cream gravy, collard greens, and mac and cheese that made Delaney's professional baker's heart sing with envy. They ate slowly, sharing bites and stories. He told her about growing up in Charleston's elite society, choosing the army over his father's banking empire. She told him about learning to bake at her grandmother's hip, about the day her mother first forgot her name. When Lucy herself appeared, gray-haired and apple-cheeked, with peach cobbler and coffee, the storm outside was forgotten entirely. "Y'all come back now?" Lucy called as they left, wrapped in the warmth of good food and better company. The rain had stopped, leaving everything fresh and clean. Beckham helped her into the truck, then surprised her by walking to the bed and pulling out a blanket. "One more stop?" he asked. "If you're willing to trust me?" She was surprised to realize she did trust him. Completely. He drove them to the old water tower at the edge of town, the highest point for miles, overlooking patchwork fields and scattered lights, spread the blanket on the truck bed. Together they lay back, watching stars emerge between parting clouds. His arm wrapped around, her shoulders solid and secure. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making me feel safe. It's been a long time since..." He turned his head, and suddenly they were breathing the same air. His eyes dropped to her lips. "Delaney," he murmured, her name a prayer and a question. She answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative as morning light. Then his hand cupped her cheek and something broke open inside her, sweet and aching and real. When they finally parted, stars wheeled overhead and crickets sang in the wet grass below. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them had to. Sometimes the biggest truths are told in silence. Sometimes love tastes like rain and peach cobbler and possibility. And sometimes, on a summer night in South Carolina, two broken people find that their edges fit together perfectly, making something new and whole and beautiful. The storm had passed, but the thunder in their hearts remained. The first time Beckham James Voss had a panic attack in front of Delaney. It was over something, as simple as a car backfiring. They were walking from morning march to Sweet Grace's, carrying coffee and sharing quiet morning conversation, when the sound cracked through the air like gunfire. One moment, he was telling her about his plans to expand the coffee shop's menu. The next, he was back in Kandahar, dust in his throat and blood on his hands. "Beckham?" Her voice seemed to come from very far away. "Beck, look at me. Focus on my voice." He tried. God, how he tried. But his hands were shaking so badly he dropped his coffee cup. Hot liquid splashed across the sidewalk, and suddenly he was seeing other things spilling, spreading. "The sun is rising." Delaney's voice cut through the chaos, steady as a heartbeat. "The sky is turning pink. Your coffee shop smells like roasted beans and cinnamon. My hands are covered in flour from this morning's biscuits. Stay with me. Stay here." Slowly, the world came back into focus. They were sitting on the curb. When had that happened? His breathing was ragged, but no longer the desperate gasps of moments ago. Delaney sat beside him, close but not touching, grounding him with her quiet presence. "I'm sorry," he managed finally, shame burning in his throat. "Don't." Her voice was firm. "Don't apologize for surviving." He looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't wearing makeup, her hair hastily braided for the early morning shift. Flour dusted her cheek like war paint, and her eyes held no pity, only understanding. "How did you know?" he asked. "What to do?" "My daddy." She traced patterns in the spilled coffee with the toe of her boot. "He came back different. Mama learned how to help him through the rough patches. She taught me." Before he could respond, Maddie's voice carried across the street. "Dee, your mother's on the phone." The change in Delaney was instant. She stood, brushing off her apron. "I have to go," he said. "I'm okay." But she hesitated, torn between duty and desire. It was a look he recognized from his own mirror. "Tonight?" she asked, "after closing?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. Watched her hurry back to the bakery, her braid swinging like a pendulum, marking time he couldn't quite grasp. The day passed in a blur of customers and coffee grounds. Every time the door chimed, he looked up, hoping to see her. But Sweet Grace's was unusually busy. A wedding cake order he learned from the gossip of regular customers. And his own shop seemed determined to test him, with the espresso machine acting up and a supplier mixing up their orders. It wasn't until sunset that he saw her again. She appeared in his doorway just as he was wiping down the last tables, looking exhausted but somehow still beautiful in the fading light. "Rough day?" he asked, setting aside his cleaning cloth. "Mama had an episode." She sank into the nearest chair. "Thought I was her sister. Kept asking about Daddy, if he'd called from the base yet." Her voice cracked slightly. "I had to tell her he was gone." Again, without thinking, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, burying her face in his chest. He could feel her trembling. "I'm so tired," she whispered against his shirt. "I know, sweetheart, I know." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other up. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were dry but red-rimmed. "The worst part?" She gave a hollow laugh. "I couldn't even fall apart properly. Had to finish Mrs. Henderson's wedding cake. 3 tiers of vanilla bean with hand-piped roses. Couldn't let my hands shake, couldn't mess up." "Like muscle memory," he said softly. "The body knows what to do even when the heart is breaking." "Yeah." She looked up at him. "Like that." Without discussion, they moved to the small couch in the corner, his favorite spot for quiet moments between rushes. She curled into his side like she belonged there. Maybe she did. "Tell me something good," she murmured. "Something that made you smile today." He thought for a moment. "Tommy, from Lucy's, came by this morning. Said his grandmother wants us to come back for Sunday dinner." "Really?" "Mm-hmm. Apparently you impressed her with your appreciation of her mac and cheese recipe. It was amazing." Delaney shifted slightly, getting more comfortable. "Did she really use 3 kinds of cheese?" 4, but the 4th is a family secret. Guess we'll have to go back then." Guess so. He pressed a kiss to her temple, breathing in the scent of vanilla and home. You free this Sunday? She stiffened almost imperceptibly. I don't know if I can leave Mama that long. Bring her. The words surprised him, but he meant them. Lucy's is good with... She understands about memory issues, has a quiet room, in the back, away from the crowd, and I thought maybe what? Maybe it's time I met her properly. Your mother. Not just 5 minutes in your living room, but really met her. Delaney sat up, searching his face. Beck, you don't have to. I want to. He took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. I want to know all of you. The good days and the bad. The moments when you're strong, and the ones when you're tired. He swallowed hard. I want to be someone you can lean on, even if I'm not always steady myself. Tears spilled down her cheeks, the ones she'd been holding back all day. He wiped them away gently. You're already that someone, she whispered. God help me, but you are. When he kissed her this time, it tasted like salt and coffee and truth. Like promises neither of them was ready to make, but both of them wanted to keep. Outside, the street lamps flickered on one by one, casting long shadows through the coffee shop windows. But in their corner, wrapped in each other's arms, the darkness couldn't touch them. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about holding someone while they break and letting them hold you while you heal. And sometimes in a small coffee shop after hours, two people learn that being broken doesn't mean being unfixable. It just means you have room to grow together. Stay, he murmured against her hair. Just a little longer. She did. And for a while, that was enough. Delaney watched her mother smooth her church dress for the third time in 5 minutes. The pale blue fabric, carefully pressed the night before, brought out the silver in Margaret's hair, making her look more like the woman in Delaney's childhood memories. Are you sure about this, sugar? Margaret asked, adjusting her pearl necklace. I'm having a good day, but you know how evenings can get. We don't have to stay long, Mama. Delaney secured the last bobby pin in her own hair, a simple twist that kept her waves off her neck in the Carolina heat. And Lucy's is quiet, private. And this young man of yours, Beckham, he understands about... Margaret gestured vaguely at her head. He does. Delaney knelt before her mother's chair, taking her trembling hands. More than most. A car door, closed outside. Through the window, Delaney saw Beckham's truck in the driveway, freshly washed. He stepped out wearing pressed khakis and a light blue button-down that made her heart skip. Always the soldier, even in civilian clothes. Well, Margaret squared her shoulders. Let's not keep him waiting. Beckham met them at the door, offering his arm to Margaret with natural grace. Ma'am, you look lovely. Such manners. Margaret smiled, patting his arm. Your mama raised you right. Something flickered in Beckham's eyes, a shadow quickly hidden. My grandfather, actually. He was old-school Charleston. The drive to Lucy's was filled with Margaret's gentle questions about Beckham's coffee shop, his favorite hymns, whether he preferred cornbread with or without sugar. Simple things, safe things. But Delaney noticed how he answered each one with careful respect, how he adjusted the air conditioning when her mother shivered, how he avoided the pothole that always made the ride too bumpy. Lucy's looked different in Sunday afternoon light. Sunbeams slanted through the old oaks, casting dappled shadows on the white clapboard walls. The wraparound porch was dotted with regulars in their church clothes, enjoying sweet tea and gossip. Beckham James Voss. Lucy herself appeared at the screen door, wrapped in a floral apron that had seen decades of Sunday dinners. Don't you dare let Miss Margaret stand out in this heat. She ushered them inside to a private corner table, already set with crystal, glasses and Lucy's best china. A small vase of fresh-cut zinnias brightened the checked tablecloth. Now then, Lucy settled Margaret with a motherly fuss. I heard someone likes my orange-glazed chicken. Margaret's face lit up. That was Henry's. Favorite? My husband. He always said nobody made it quite like. She trailed off, confusion clouding her eyes. Delaney reached for her hand under the table. That's right, Lucy said smoothly. Captain Henry Rhodes. He used to bring you here on date nights, didn't he? Back when my daddy ran the place. Margaret nodded slowly, memories realigning. Yes, he did. Beckham's hand found Delaney's other one, squeezing gently. The food arrived in waves. Crispy fried okra, butter beans cooked with ham hocks, cornbread straight from the cast-iron skillet. Each dish came with a story from Lucy about who had passed down the recipe, what church supper had made it famous, which local boy had proposed over it. Margaret relaxed as the meal progressed, sharing her own memories of church socials and PTA meetings. Sometimes the years got mixed up, but Lucy and Beckham followed every thread, helping her weave them back together. More sweet tea, Miss Margaret? Tommy appeared with a fresh pitcher. Thank you, Henry. Margaret smiled up at him, then froze. I'm sorry, No harm done, ma'am. Tommy's voice was gentle. My grandma says I look just like my grandpa did at my age. He served with your husband in Desert Storm. Delaney felt her mother's hand tighten on hers, waited for the confusion, the distress that usually followed these moments. But Beckham's voice cut through the tension. Ma'am, would you tell me about Captain Rhodes, what kind of commander he was? Margaret's eyes cleared slightly. Oh, he was respected, loved by his men, never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. She smiled at a distant memory. He used to say a good leader's job wasn't to be first in line, but to make sure everyone in line made it home. Sounds like a wise man. Beckham's voice carried genuine respect. We had a saying in Afghanistan, leave no one behind. Yes. Margaret's voice strengthened. That's exactly what Henry would say. The conversation shifted naturally to lighter topics. Lucy's famous peach cobbler, the upcoming town festival, Tommy's college plans. But something had changed. A bridge had been built, spanning grief and memory and understanding. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Margaret showed no signs of sundowning. She was tired, but present, peaceful. In the truck on the way home, she dozed against Delaney's shoulder. Beckham drove carefully, avoiding bumps, checking his mirrors with military precision. Thank you, Delaney whispered. He glanced at her, blue-gray eyes soft in the fading light. For what? For understanding, for making her feel seen. She raised an amazing daughter. His voice was low, meant just for her. How could I not honor that? At home, he helped Margaret to her door with the same gentle strength he'd shown, all day. She patted his cheek before going inside. You're good for my girl, she said clearly. Don't mess it up. No, ma'am, I won't. Later, after Mrs. Patterson arrived for the evening shift, Delaney walked Beckham to his truck. The air was heavy with jasmine and approaching rain. Did you mean it? She asked. What you said to Mama about Henry? About leaving no one behind? He turned to her, frame backlit by the setting sun. In the army, it's not just a saying, it's a promise. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. But sometimes it means more than that. Sometimes it means staying when things get hard, standing guard when the nights are long, holding on when memories slip away. She pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing in coffee and cologne and certainty. That sounds an awful lot like love. Maybe it is. He tilted her chin up, eyes serious. Maybe that's exactly what it is. Oidu. When he kissed her, it felt like a promise, like coming home, like finally understanding what her grandmother meant when she said some hearts just know their own. Thunder rolled in the distance. Neither of them moved. Sometimes love speaks in the language of shared meals and gentle understanding. Sometimes it shows itself in the way a soldier holds a mother's memories as carefully as he once held his nation's flag. And sometimes, on a Sunday evening in South Carolina, it whispers in the spaces between thunder and touch, between memory and promise, between what was lost and what can still be found. The rain began to fall, But this time, they weren't afraid of storms. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, Charleston's oldest printer's mark embossed in gold. Beckham stared at it for a long moment, coffee growing cold beside him in Morning March's empty dining room. The Charleston Society of Banking and Commerce requests the honor of your presence at the annual Veterans Recognition Gala, honoring our military heroes, including Distinguished Service Cross recipient Captain Beckham James Voss. His father's signature graced the bottom. Douglas, Voss III Chairman. The bell above the door chimed. Delaney walked in carrying a box of fresh pastries and wearing one of her vintage-inspired dresses, this one yellow with tiny white daisies. Her smile faded when she saw his face. Beck? What's wrong? He wordlessly handed her the invitation. Watched her read it, her gray eyes widening slightly. Distinguished Service Cross? Her voice was soft. You never mentioned. Because I don't talk about it. The words came out sharper than he intended. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I'm sorry. It's just complicated. She set the pastry box down and perched on the edge of his table. Tell me. He stood, needing to move, began wiping down already clean counters. My father, he's using it. Using me. Again. Making a show of supporting veterans while his bank forecloses on their homes. But you don't have to go. I do. His hand tightened on the cleaning cloth. Because if I don't, he'll pull his support from the veteran shelter. The one that helps guys transition back to civilian life, find jobs, get counseling. He'd really do that? In a heartbeat. Beckham's laugh was hollow. Douglas Voss III didn't build an empire by being soft. Delaney was quiet for a moment, watching him. When is it? Next Saturday. I'll go with you. He stilled. Delaney. You don't have to face him alone. She stood, moved closer. I can wear something nice, be charming? It's not that simple. He stepped back, creating distance. These people, they're sharks in designer suits. They'll smell small town on you like blood in the water. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. Delaney's face went carefully blank, the same expression she wore when difficult customers complained about her prices. Small town, she repeated quietly, like blood in the water. That's not what No, I think that's exactly what you meant. She smoothed her vintage dress, suddenly self-conscious. Heaven forbid your father's banking friends meet someone who makes honest bread instead of dirty money. Delaney, please. You know what's funny? Her voice trembled slightly. I was actually starting to think that maybe. She shook her head. But I'm just another project, aren't I? Like your shelter boys. Something broken you can fix. That's not true. He reached for her, but she stepped away. Then what am I, Beckham? Because right now, it sounds an awful lot like I'm not good enough for your world. You don't understand? No, I understand perfectly. She grabbed her purse, movement sharp with hurt. I understand that when push comes to shove, I'm still just the baker's daughter. Still small town. Still not quite enough. The bell chimed again as she left, the sound harsh and final. Through the window, he watched her cross the street to Sweet Grace's, her yellow dress bright against the morning gray. He should follow her. Should explain about his father's manipulation, about the politics of old money, about how none of it matters because she's everything that world isn't, real and honest and true. Instead, he stood frozen, the invitation crumpled in his fist. The day passed in a blur of customers and coffee. Every time the door opened, his heart jumped, hoping it was her. But she didn't come back. Sweet Grace's remained busy as ever, but Maddie handled the coffee runs, her usually bright smile replaced with an icy glare in his direction. At sunset, he finally worked up the courage to cross the street. But Sweet Grace's was already dark. The closed sign turned early. His phone buzzed. A text from Delaney. Mama's having a bad night. Don't come over. Another buzz. I need some time. He started to type a response, deleted it, tried again. Nothing seemed right. Nothing could fix what he'd broken with careless words and old fears. The rain started as he walked home, a soft, steady drizzle that soaked through his shirt. He welcomed it, needed it to wash away the taste of regret. Inside his apartment above the coffee shop, he poured a glass of water. Never alcohol, not with his demons so close to the surface, and tried to imagine walking into that gala alone, facing his father's subtle barbs and pointed questions about his little coffee experiment, accepting an honor he'd rather forget for actions that still haunted his dreams. His phone buzzed again. For a moment, hope flared, but it was just his father. The Post and Courier wants to do a feature. Wear your dress uniform, and for God's sake, get a proper haircut. Beckham set the phone down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. Through his window, he could see Sweet Grace's dark windows. Somewhere beyond them, Delaney was dealing with her mother's confusion, her own pain. Alone. Because he'd pushed her away. Because he'd let his father's world, the world he'd fought so hard to escape, taint the one pure thing in his life. Thunder rolled outside, and for the first time since meeting Delaney, he had no one to help him weather the storm. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come from the words we can't take back. Sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gaps between worlds. And sometimes, on a rainy night in South Carolina, a soldier learns that the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the ghosts of who we used to be and the fear of who we might become. The rain fell harder, and this time he faced it alone. "You're doing it wrong," Maddie said, filming Delaney's aggressive kneading of sourdough bread. Her TikTok followers had been worried. 3 days of stress-baking videos with no signature. Sweet Grace's smile. "The dough's not therapy putty, honey." "I'm fine." Delaney punched down the dough harder, flour clouding the air. She'd been fine for 4 days now. Fine when she changed her morning coffee route. Fine when she worked until midnight, testing new recipes no one had ordered. Fine when she pretended not to notice the light still burning in morning marches. Upstairs window or the way Beckham's truck hadn't moved since Tuesday. "Right." Maddie set her phone down. "And I'm the Queen of England. Spill." "There's nothing to—" The bakery door chimed. Both women turned, tension crackling in the air. But it was only Tommy from Lucy's, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "Ms. Rhodes? Grandma Lucy sent me. Said to give you this." He placed a folded note on the counter, carefully avoiding the flour dust. Delaney recognized Lucy's elegant cursive, written on paper torn from her recipe book. "Child, when your grandmother gave me her coconut cake recipe, she said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the sweetest things need a pinch of salt to rise properly. Come see me. Bring that soldier boy of yours. Lucy." "She means well," Tommy added softly. "She's worried about both of you. Says the captain hasn't been to Sunday dinner since—" "Thank you, Tommy." Delaney's voice was tight. "Tell your grandmother. I'm fine, we're fine, everything's—" "Girl, if you say fine one more time, I'm hiding your vanilla beans," Maddie interrupted. She turned to Tommy. "How is he? Really?" Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "Not good, ma'am. Grandma says he looks like he did when he first came home. Quiet. Too quiet. Keeps organizing sugar packets by color. Started doing morning PT again, running until his legs give out." Something in Delaney's chest cracked. She remembered Beckham explaining once how physical exhaustion helped quiet the noise in his head, how running until he couldn't think straight was better than thinking too much. "The gala's tomorrow night," Tommy continued. "Grandma's worried he'll—" "That's enough." Delaney turned back to her dough, knuckles white. "Please thank Lucy for her concern, but—" The door chimed again. This time Margaret Rhodes stood in the entrance wearing her garden club dress and a determined expression. Mrs. Patterson hovered anxiously behind her. "Mama?" Delaney wiped her hands on her apron. "What are you doing here? You should be resting." "Eleanor Patterson." Margaret fixed her neighbor with a stern look. "Stop fussing. I'm having a clear day and I aim to use it." She turned to her daughter. "Now then, where is that young man of yours?" "Mama, please." "Don't, Mama. Please me, Delaney Grace." I may not remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember the way that boy looked at you, like your daddy used to look at me. The bakery fell silent. Even Maddie stopped fidgeting with her phone. He hurt me, Delaney whispered. Did he mean to? No. Maybe. I don't know. Margaret crossed to the counter, movements slow but purposeful. Your daddy hurt me once. Not meaning to, but deep all the same. Said something foolish about my family's farm when his military friends came to visit. Pride and fear make fools of the best men. What did you do? Made him sleep on the couch for a week. Margaret's eyes twinkled. Then I forgave him. Because love, real love, is bigger than pride, stronger than fear. It's not that simple, Mama. Nothing worth having ever is. Margaret touched her daughter's flour-dusted cheek. But you're my daughter, and I raised you to be brave, even on the days when being brave means being vulnerable. I don't know if I can... The door chimed a third time. Beckham stood in the doorway, still in his running clothes, chest heaving like he'd sprinted across town. His hair was wild. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his left hand trembled slightly at his side. For a moment, no one moved. Then Margaret spoke. Well, it's about time. She turned to the others. Maddie, be a dear and take me to get some tea. Tommy, Eleanor, I believe you both have somewhere else to be. They filed out quickly, Maddie squeezing Delaney's hand as she passed. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click. Silence stretched between Delaney and Beckham, thick as honey and twice as heavy. You're wearing your grandmother's apron, he said finally, voice rough. The one with the blue flowers. You noticed that? I notice everything about you. He took a step forward, then stopped. That's part of the problem. You're everything, Delaney. Everything real and good and true. And You're what? Broken, damaged, still fighting wars that ended years ago. His laugh was bitter. Still letting my father pull my strings like I'm some puppet in his show. You think I'm not broken? She gestured to the chaos of stress baking surrounding them. You think watching my mother fade away, piece by piece, hasn't damaged me? You think I don't know what it's like to fight battles no one else can see? That's different. Why? Because I'm small town? The words still stung, but less sharply now. Or because you think your scars are somehow worse than mine? He flinched. I never meant... I know what you meant. She stepped closer, close enough to smell sweat and coffee and desperation on his skin. You meant to protect me, from your father, from his world, from your pain. But here's the thing about being small-town Beckham James Voss. We know how to weather storms. We know how to bend without breaking. We know how to love people through their worst days and still be standing when the sun rises. Delaney. His voice broke on her name. So yes, I'm small-town. Yes, your father's friends will probably look down their Charleston noses at my vintage dresses and my flour-dusted hands. But you know what? She reached up, touched his face. I don't care because I love you, all of you. The soldier and the coffee shop owner. The Charleston heir and the broken man who runs until his legs give out. I love... He kissed her. Hard and desperate and tasting of salt. She kissed him back just as fiercely, fingers curling in his sweat-dampened shirt. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I know. She smoothed his wild hair. But you're going to make it up to me. How? First, you're going to go home and sleep, really sleep. Then you're going to eat something besides coffee and regret. She smiled slightly. And tomorrow night, you're going to walk into that gala with your head high and your small-town girlfriend on your arm. They'll talk. Let them. She kissed. Him again, softer this time. We've survived worse than Charleston gossip. He pulled back slightly, studying her face. I love you. You know that, right? Even when I'm being an idiot? Especially then. She brushed flour off his shirt. Now go. Sleep. I have a gala dress to figure out. Wear whatever you want. You'll be the most beautiful woman there. Smooth talker. Honest man. After he left reluctantly with promises to text when he woke up, Delaney stood in her quiet bakery, touching her lips where she could still taste his kiss. The door chimed one final time. Maddie poked her head in, grinning. So, about that dress. I might have an idea. Sometimes love means fighting for what matters. Sometimes it means letting go of pride and fear and all the walls we build to protect our hearts. And sometimes on a flower-dusted morning in South Carolina, it means choosing to be brave enough to try again. The sun broke through the clouds, and this time they were ready for whatever storm came next. The Charleston Ritz-Carlton ballroom dripped old money. Crystal chandeliers caught candlelight like captured stars, while tables draped in white silk held arrangements of white roses and silver ribbons. The banking elite of South Carolina mingled in designer suits and couture gowns, their laughter as practiced as their philanthropy. Beckham stood in his dress uniform, medals gleaming, posture perfect, and tried not to count exits like he was back in combat. His father's text had been clear. Don't embarrass me. Some of our biggest clients will be there. But all thoughts of his father vanished when Delaney stepped out of Maddie's borrowed Audi. She wore silk the color of storm clouds, a vintage-inspired gown that floated when she moved. Her blonde hair was swept up, tiny pearl pins catching the light like dewdrops. But it was her eyes that struck him, clear and steady, ready for battle. You look... He couldn't find the words. Like I belong? Her voice carried a hint of challenge. Like yourself. He offered his arm. Which is better than belonging? They climbed the marble steps together, her hand warm on his sleeve. At the entrance, a society matron in diamonds checked their names against the guest list, her eyebrows rising slightly at Delaney's. Miss Rhodes? I don't believe I know the family. Sweet Grace's Bakery. Delaney smiled, sweet as sugar with steel. Underneath. You might remember my grandmother's coconut cake from your daughter's wedding. The one with the hand-piped roses? The woman's face shifted. Grace Rhodes was your grandmother? Why, she was an institution. Such a shame about the location, but her talent still runs in the family, Beckham cut in smoothly, along with her grace. They moved past the woman before she could respond. Inside, the ballroom hummed with strings and subtle power plays. Beckham felt Delaney's slight intake of breath and squeezed her hand. Remember, he murmured, you've faced scarier things than these people. Have I? You face my coffee attempts every morning. She laughed, tension easing slightly. Then her spine stiffened. Incoming. Douglas Voss III approached like a shark scenting blood, his custom tuxedo as sharp as his smile. Charleston's most powerful banker stood barely as tall as his son but carried himself like a giant. Beckham. His voice held the polish of prep schools and boardrooms. I was beginning to worry you wouldn't show. His eyes flicked to Delaney. And this is Delaney Grace Rhodes. She extended her hand like her grandmother had taught her, firm, palm down, ready for either a handshake or a kiss. Your son's partner. Douglas's eyebrows rose at partner. Indeed. And what is it you do, Miss Rhodes? I own Sweet Grace's Bakery. Perhaps you've heard of it? We've been serving Charleston's finest families for 3 generations. Ah. The O word dripped condescension. How quaint. Though I'm surprised Beckham didn't mention you before. We do try to keep track of his activities. Some things are too precious to share. Beckham's voice was quiet but carried. Several heads turned. Like integrity, honor, love. His father's smile tightened. Speaking of honor, the ceremony begins soon. Do try to keep your speech appropriate. The Post and Courier is here. He melted back into the crowd, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and disapproval. Well, Delaney breathed. That was... I'm so sorry. Don't you dare apologize. She straightened his medals, already perfect. He doesn't get to make you small. Before he could respond, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium where Douglas stood, resplendent in his tuxedo. "Distinguished guests, we gather tonight to honor our military heroes." The speech was perfectly crafted, each word designed to showcase the bank's commitment to veterans while glossing over their actual practices. Beckham's hands clenched at his sides as his father described the Distinguished Service Cross ceremony, the one he'd received in a military hospital, half-conscious and missing men he couldn't save. Then, and now, a few words from our honored hero, Captain Beckham James Voss. The spotlight swung to him. Delaney squeezed his hand once, then let go. He walked to the podium like approaching enemy fire. Looking out at the sea of expensive faces, he saw his father's warning glare, saw the reporters poised with their notebooks, saw Delaney, standing tall in her vintage silk, eyes fierce with pride and love. He took a deep breath. The medal they're honoring tonight, his voice carried in the sudden silence. "I received it for leading a rescue mission, not the kind that makes headlines. Just 6 men trapped behind enemy lines. The brass said it was too risky, survival chances too low." He paused, remembering dust and blood and promises. "But there's something they teach us in the military, something that matters more than risks or odds or proper procedures. We leave no one behind." His father's face darkened, recognizing the deviation from the approved speech. "That's why I'm here tonight. Not for recognition, not for publicity, but because there are veterans in this city who need help. Real help. The kind that comes from actions, not words." He met his father's eyes directly. "The Stewart Street Shelter helps soldiers transition home, gives them counseling, job training, hope. They operate on a small budget and big hearts, and they're about to lose their building." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "My father's bank holds their mortgage, the same bank that's spending thousands on tonight's party, the same bank that claims to support veterans while foreclosing on their homes." "Beckham." His father's voice held warning. "So yes, I'm honored by this recognition, but I'd be more honored if this room full of Charleston's finest actually did something fine. The shelter needs $300,000 to buy their building outright. That's probably less than what some of you spent on tonight's outfits." Silence fell, heavy as artillery fire. "I'm pledging my entire trust fund, all $2 million of it, to the shelter, and I'm challenging everyone in this room to match it. Because that's what real honor looks like. That's what leaving no one behind means." He stepped back from the podium. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Delaney started clapping. The sound rang out clear and fearless. Others joined slowly at first, then in a wave. His father's face was thunderous. "You cannot." "Already did." Beckham's voice was calm. "Papers were signed this morning, it's done." He walked back to Delaney through the applause, heart pounding but step steady. She took his hand without hesitation. "That," she whispered, "was the bravest thing I've ever seen." "No." He touched her cheek. "The bravest thing was you walking in here tonight, ready to face them all for me. Ready to face anything for you." He kissed her then, not caring who saw. Let them talk. Let them judge. Some things were worth more than reputation or inheritance or proper Charleston behavior. As if reading his mind, Delaney smiled against his lips. "Want to really give them something to talk about? What did you have in mind?" She pulled back, eyes dancing. "Lucy's is still open, and I'm craving some real food and real company." "Informal wear? Why not? We'll start a trend." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that scared ghosts away. "Lead the way, Miss Rhodes." They left through the main doors, ignoring his father's calls, the reporters' questions, the society whispers. Outside, the night air was thick with jasmine and possibility. Sometimes courage means standing up to enemies. Sometimes it means standing up to family. And sometimes, on a starlit night in Charleston, it means choosing love over legacy, truth over tradition, and the simple grace of being real in a world built on pretense. The storm had passed, and they had weathered it together. Dawn painted Sweet Grace's windows gold, catching on the hand-painted letters just as it had for 3 generations. Delaney stood in her grandmother's apron, watching the sun rise over her world, a world that felt both smaller and infinitely larger after last night's Charleston drama. The bell chimed softly. She didn't need to turn to know it was Beckham, his footsteps, his presence, the scent of fresh coffee and something more. "You're up early," she said, continuing to roll out pie crust. "Couldn't sleep." He set 2 coffee cups on the counter. "Kept thinking about something your mother said at Sunday dinner, about how some hearts just know their own." She stilled, rolling pin hovering. "Beck, let me finish?" His voice was gentle but held an undercurrent of steel. The same tone he'd used at the podium last night. "Because I've been practicing this speech since we left Lucy's, and if I don't get it out now, I might lose my nerve." She turned then, flour dusting her hands, heart thundering against her ribs. Beckham stood in his familiar spot by the counter, but something was different. His eyes held a light she'd never seen before, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Last night," he continued, "watching you walk into that ballroom, I realized something. You weren't just brave for me. You were brave for yourself, for who you are. Small town and vintage dresses and flour-dusted hands and all. Beck, and that's when I knew, really knew." He stepped closer. "I've spent years running from who I was, from Charleston society, from my father's world, from my own shadows, but you've always known exactly who you are, where you belong. And where's that? Right here." He gestured to the bakery. Morning, light streaming through its windows. "In your grandmother's kitchen, making things that matter, real things, sweet things." His voice softened. "And somehow, somewhere along the way, you made room for me too." She set down the rolling pin, heart in her throat. "There was always room for you. I know that now." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small and glinting. "Which is why I'm hoping there's room for this too." In his palm lay a ring, not a fancy Charleston diamond, but a simple band of rose gold wrapped around a small pearl. Her grandmother's ring, the one she'd last seen in her mother's jewelry box. "How did you—" "I asked your mother's permission last week, before everything. She was having a clear day. Said she'd been waiting for me to ask." His hand trembled slightly. "The pearls from your grandmother's collection. Your mother said she'd want you to have it, to keep the tradition alive." Tears blurred Delaney's vision. "When did you become so sure?" "The moment you saw me break and didn't try to fix me, just held on, weathered the storm." He took her flour-covered hand. "I'm not perfect, Delaney Grace Rhodes. I still have nightmares. Still organize sugar packets by color. Still run when things get hard. I know. But I'm done running from this, from us." He dropped to one knee, right there on her bakery floor. "I love every piece of you. The way you talk to your cupcakes, how you know exactly how much cinnamon belongs in morning buns. The strength it takes to watch your mother fade and still find sweetness in each day." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "I love that you see me, really see me. Not the Charleston heir or the decorated soldier or even the coffee shop owner, just me. Broken pieces and all. Not broken," she managed. "Just weathered, like Grandma's cast iron skillet." He laughed softly. "See? That's what I mean. You make everything better, sweeter, more real." He held up the ring. "So I'm asking, will you marry me? Let me stand beside you through whatever storms come next?" The morning light caught the pearl, making it glow like a captured star. Like hope. Like promise. "Yes." The word came out half laugh, half sob. "Yes, you beautiful, complicated man. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, flour dust and all. When he stood and pulled her close, she could feel his heart racing against hers. The kiss tasted like coffee and tears and joy. So much joy it hurt. The bakery door chimed again. They broke apart to find Margaret standing there, clear-eyed and beaming, with Maddie and Mrs. Patterson hovering excitedly behind her. "Well?" Margaret demanded. "Did he do it properly? Down on one knee like a gentleman? Yes, Mama. Delaney showed her her ring once worn by 3 generations of Rhodes women. Good. Margaret's eyes filled. Your grandmother would be so proud of both of you. Maddie pushed forward, phone already recording. This is going viral. Y'all, my followers are going to lose it. The small-town baker and the coffee shop soldier, it's like a Hallmark movie, but better because it's real. Speaking of real, Mrs. Patterson added, Lucy sent me with breakfast, said she knew you two would be too excited to eat properly. They all crowded into the bakery, family by blood and choice, sharing Lucy's biscuits and watching the sun climb higher. Beckham kept his arm around Delaney, as if afraid she might disappear. You know what this means? Maddie said through a mouthful of biscuit. We get to plan a wedding. A small one, Delaney and Beckham said together, then laughed. At Lucy's, Delaney added, with real food and simple flowers and love, Margaret finished softly. Lots of love. Later, after everyone had gone and the morning rush had died down, Delaney and Beckham stood in the space between their shops. The ring caught the light as she reached up to straighten his collar. No regrets? She asked. About last night? The trust fund? None. He kissed her forehead. Money comes and goes, but this? He touched the ring. This is forever. Forever, she echoed. I like the sound of that. Good. He smiled. That rare, full smile that still made her heart skip. Because I plan to spend forever bringing you coffee and stealing your lemon squares and loving you through every storm. Even the bad days? Especially those. He pulled her closer. Because that's what real love does. It stays. It endures. It rises. Like bread dough under gentle hands, like hope in dark places, like love in small towns. Sometimes the sweetest things take time to proof. Sometimes the strongest hearts are the ones that know how to bend without breaking. And sometimes, on a golden morning in South Carolina, 2 people who have weathered storms apart learn the simple, profound joy of weathering them together. The sun rose higher. The bells chimed. And their story was just beginning. 1 year later, the morning sun slanted through Sweet Grace's new bay windows, catching on the gold lettering freshly painted across the glass. Sweet Grace's in mourning. March, coffee pastries home. Delaney stood in the doorway between what had once been 2 separate shops, now joined by an archway lined with exposed brick and twinkle lights. The renovation had been Beckham's idea, knocking down the wall that separated their businesses, just as they'd knocked down the walls around their hearts. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Voss? His voice came from behind her, warm and sure as morning coffee. Still getting used to that name? She smiled, leaning back against his chest, though I like how it looks on the business license. The merged shops had been their first major decision as newlyweds, that and keeping the separate entrances. Because some people need coffee before they're ready for sweetness, Beckham had said, understanding as always. Now their regulars flowed between the spaces naturally, soldiers seeking peace in coffee and conversation, young mothers with children craving cookies, business people who'd learned that small-town charm beat corporate coffee any day. The bell chimed softly. Margaret entered, supported by Mrs. Patterson, but walking on her own. A good day, then. She wore her garden club dress and a bright smile. There's my beautiful girl, she said clearly, reaching for Delaney. And my handsome soldier. I brought your daddy's old medals, sugar. Thought maybe they'd look nice next to Beckham's in the display. The military shadow box had been Lucy's wedding gift, a simple wooden case now holding 2 generations of service and sacrifice. They'd hung it in the joined space between shops alongside photos of both families. Grace Rhodes in her first bakery, Henry Rhodes in his uniform, Beckham's grandfather teaching him to make coffee in Charleston. Thank you, Mama. Delaney took the medals gently. They'll be perfect there. Beckham helped Margaret to her favorite seat, an overstuffed armchair they'd placed in the sunny corner. Some days she sat there for hours, greeting customers like the queen of her small domain. Other days she got confused, but those moments came with less fear now. They'd learned to navigate them together. The morning crowd began trickling in. Tommy, now home from his first year of college, picking up his grandmother's standing order. Maddie, fresh from a successful TikTok livestream about small business love stories. Regular customers who'd become family. Delaney moved between coffee station and pastry counter with practiced grace. Her grandmother's apron stretched slightly over her growing belly, their newest blessing due in the fall. Beckham watched her with constant amazement, still unable to believe this was his life. His father had finally called last month after the shelter's success story made national news. The conversation had been stiff but civil, small steps. Healing took time. "Hey." Delaney's voice pulled him back to the present. "You're organizing sugar packets again. Bad habit." "No." She covered his hand with hers, wedding rings clinking, softly. "Just you. And I love all of you, remember?" He pulled her close, one hand resting on her belly. "Even when I wake up at 3 a.m. to check the locks?" "Even then." She kissed him softly. "Even when I stress bake 3 batches of cookies at midnight. Even when Mama has bad days. Even when the storms come." "Speaking of storms." He nodded toward the windows where dark clouds gathered. Once thunder had meant sleepless nights and haunted memories. Now. "I'll get the blankets." Delaney smiled. "You make the coffee." It had become their ritual on stormy nights, curling up in the shop's window seat, watching rain paint patterns on glass, sharing quiet thoughts and gentle touches. Sometimes customers joined them, other souls seeking shelter from various storms. They were always welcome. "You know what Grandma Grace used to say?" Delaney murmured, tracing the words on the window. "She said love is like good bread. It needs time to rise, warmth to grow, and strong hands to shape it. But most of all, it needs a home to fill with its sweetness." Beckham wrapped his arms around her, feeling their baby flutter beneath his hands. Outside, the first drops fell. Inside, coffee brewed and ovens warmed and love rose like fresh bread. "Welcome home," he whispered. And it was, because sometimes love is grand gestures and dramatic moments, but more often, it's the quiet choice to stay, to grow, to build something beautiful from broken pieces and brave hearts. Sometimes it's as simple as coffee and pastries, shared stories and weathered storms. Sometimes it's the sweetness of time, proving that the best things like bread, like love, like healing, can't be rushed. They can only be tended with patient hands and faithful hearts, until one day you look up and realize home was never a place. It was always a love story. And they lived, not perfectly but beautifully ever after. The end. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and risking everything for love? Like Delaney and Beckham, sometimes the scariest storms aren't the ones raging outside, but the ones that ask us to be brave enough to let someone in. Would you have the courage to love someone through your broken pieces, knowing that they are doing the same for you? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.